Okay, welcome everybody. And we're so glad to see all of you here. This is really exciting to have so many of you here to share. So this series is going to be based on this book, which was written by Dr. Becky Bailey, and she's the founder of Conscious Discipline. So it's all tied into conscious discipline. And Tanika and I are both with the Child Care Resource Network. I wonder if I have to move the mouse back over. Okay. All right. Nope, that's true. So these are the services that we offer at the Child Care Resource Network. We're located in Lafayette, but we serve 27 counties, including Clinton County. You want to share a little bit about what all we do?
So one of the big things that we do is that we do referrals for families who are looking for childcare. So typically we're able to share our childcare forum online, and parents will give us the information that they're looking for: name, address, the child's date of birth, the days and times that they're looking for care. If you guys receive a childcare voucher or any type of funding, we're able to provide you with a list of providers who meet those needs. So that's one of the bigger things that we do. We also provide education in the form of our workshops. So we do workshops at least once a week. We cover various topics. Both of those are free. Referrals and workshops are both free. And the workshops that we do, it can have things to do like challenging behaviors. We did a lot on COVID when COVID first started, especially with work and life balance, just stress management, self-care, and those type of things. We're also able to provide information for people who are wanting to become a child care provider. So we're able to help them and walk them through that licensing process. And then I think I covered all of them. We also provide community services to try to collaborate with the community to be able to come together and work with each other, family-facing agencies, to try to make things simpler for families for any services that they're needing.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then again, I am Tanika Fennessy, and I am one of the family engagement specialists here at the Child Care Resource Network. Prior to this, I used to be a past to quality coach, and I worked with providers on the quality rating system. And so with the family engagement specialist, again, like I said, we provide referrals. We work with families for resources that they might be looking for with their children. We provide workshops, and that is what I do as family engagement specialist.
And Melissa was going to be here tonight. She is ill and having a rough week all the way around, but she really wanted to be here. But she's going to be here next week and the weeks to follow. And then my name is Sarah. Have the same position as Tanika. My background, I've been a parent. We've both been parent. Well, we are parents. We're parents. I've been a teacher, and I've been a director. I've been a trainer. I did research with Purdue on past equality, and I've done work as a social worker. So pretty much children and families and early childhood is my jam. So a little bit about us. So like I mentioned before, this is being recorded, but I really do want to have some discussion, and I want you to feel like you can ask questions and share some of your experiences, because this is how we can all learn. We all learn from each other. And I don't consider myself an expert when it comes to conscious discipline. I have a lot of knowledge, and I've been through the training, but I am still learning and practicing as I go, and I learn from everybody that I talk to about it. So I really want you to feel like you can share, but if you would rather not share or ask a question while it's being recorded, There are Post-it notes and pens on each of your tables. If you want to jot something down, we'll keep it in a parking lot. Before we end, we'll stop the recording, and then we can have some further discussion. So just kind of keep that in mind. I would love for you to share anything or ask questions, but if you're not comfortable with it being recorded, we'll make sure we get to that. So I would really like to hear from all of you. If you are willing to share, again, it's what you're comfortable with, the ages of the children that either you parent or maybe you teach or care for, and why you're here tonight and what you're hoping to take away. And I'm not going to go around, so you don't have to share that, but if anyone is open to doing that, if they just want to kind of jump in and share a little bit about why they're here. I'll get started. I have 3 adult kids, well, 2 adult kids and 1 14-year-old who thinks she's an adult. And you know, some of this stuff I've started using on her, the 14-year-old. Actually, I've used it on my 19-year-old too. And it works with teenagers and young adults. So I've found some things to be quite helpful. So there's hope even for older children. So
My name's Rhonda. This is my husband, Donnie. We have well, she'll be 4 May 2nd. We have adopted her. She is our biological granddaughter, but she's our daughter now. So we are really starting over. He didn't have any children before we got married. And I had a 22-year-old son now. But so yeah, we are like parents of a toddler, and we don't have like friends that are her, you know what I mean? So we don't have a lot of experience in what we're supposed to do anymore.
You have another layer of things to like work through and learn and grow.
It's kind of, as she goes to school, I'm like gonna become friends with people that are 20 years younger than me, so that I can be friends, because she's not going anywhere if I don't know their parents. So yeah,
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
I see some little babies, and I'm so glad there's babies here. That's like my favorite age group. So
this one's not screaming, so make it a plus.
how old?
This one's 9 weeks.
I was gonna say,
He's little. We have the 2 screamers, we have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old.
so you were busy.
Yeah. I went back to work for the first day today, so.
Oh.
They're like emotional tears.
Oh my gosh. Well, bless your heart for coming here today. Oh. Well, I have a little something for you. You said she was 3-year-old.
Trying to
I'll talk about these in a little bit, but here's a couple. Thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate you being here. That is a really hard transition. I remember it's a really, really hard transition.
We haven't been in church pretty much since COVID, because I mean we were children's ministry and our kids were perfect in there, and then once that hit, it's like we can't never go back.
Yeah.
We've never made it through anything. So if they make it through this, it'll be the first thing we've ever made it through. We don't make it through a dinner. We don't make it through going out to eat.
There's lots and lots of changes and transitions for everybody.
Well, the teacher said, well, he will eventually stop. He will run out of screens.
We'll start vomiting.
He's not hurt. I mean, he's fine.
We have a lot.
He hasn't made it through without
Oh, yes,
vomiting.
look.
Not yet, he hasn't.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I had one that would throw up when he would get upset, and finally after he was about 4 years old, I said, go to the bathroom and throw up, get it over with, and come back in here, we're gonna discuss this.
Stop.
But he's had a big day today with going to the sitter and you going back to work. And
Yeah.
it's a big transition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I've
know,
been
all
there,
of us,
been there.
except one. The others are sitting at the table eating their pizzas, so they're fine.
So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to share?
Sure. Corbin and Jessor. So we've got a 3.5-year-old that attends St. Matthew's, and we've got 2-year-old twins. Launch from emotions.
I'm just amazed you were all here. I don't know that I I don't know,
guys
I
have
can
the
muster
one.
that. I don't know, that's a lie. Good for you.
I am Jeanette Faulkner, and I have 2 adult daughters. And I work here at St. Matthew's in a 3 and 4 year class. And I'm hoping to use some of this advice to help in the classroom.
Awesome.
Let me go, or you want to go?
Oh, you go ahead.
My name is Kenzie Funk. I'm actually 20 years old. I think I'm the youngest. I know I'm the youngest teacher here. Nothing against you guys, but I feel pretty young. So I'm 20 years old and I work here at the preschool PML. So 2 and 3 year olds.
I'm Nikki, and I need to make friends with this table apparently, because I'm a single mom by choice, and I was an older mother, so I
Okay.
feel like, did you say Janet?
Rhonda.
Rhonda, I don't know where I got Janet out of there, but
That's
Rhonda and we're gonna become friends.
Awesome.
Because it's like you have
Yeah.
the younger,
And I
the
like
younger
younger
parents, and
people.
I just feel old. And then I can make friends with these guys too, because I'm the mom of, I have 5-year-old twin boys, so I got the twins thing and the I feel older than everyone thing going on. My sons attend preschool here. They're in their last year of pre-K before the big kindergarten. So
Wow.
we're preparing for that, and we're just, I have 2 very vastly different personalities, and one of my sons has struggled with different sensory issues
Mhm.
and some developmental issues when he was younger that he's kind of working out of now, but he's a lot harder to discipline than his brother, and so I'm trying to find some tips that will maybe work for both with their different needs. So
Isn't it interesting how twins can be so different? I mean, I don't have twins, but it was amazing. My son, like super laid back and chill, come to know later, he's like too laid back and chill and has ADHD, inattention, and doesn't have any motivation to do much of anything. But when he's younger, we could talk through anything. We could go to the grocery store and I could talk to him about what he was about. Food, not kid. I mean, he was just, I'm like, I've got this. Like, this is good. He's so laid back and relaxed. And then I had my daughter like 4.5 years later, and she's one that would like in the middle of the grocery store, like throw herself on the ground and do like spaghetti baby and scream. And I'm like, they're so different. They're incredibly different.
it's a big difference.
Sure.
I kind of say that, I'll follow up with Sarah, I say it all the time, I am a mom of 4 adult children, 20 boys, all boys. 29, 23, 21, and 19. And so all of them also, similar personalities, but definitely differences. And some days I'm thinking, who are your parents? Did you really get switched because of those differences?
Does one of them
So,
go to IU?
yes, he does.
I had heard his story in my life, so I figured,
Okay.
I saw that last name, I was like, I've never heard that last name except for
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, yeah, he does, he does.
Awesome, well, congratulations.
Thank
He's a
you.
good kid from everything I've heard.
Thanks so much, thanks so much. So yeah, that's, it's been good, but it's been challenging. When I tell people a lot of times 4 boys are like, what in the world? And also single mom. And so when I tell them 4 boys, they're thinking it's like really a lot, but just kind of thankful to be here, just to listen. And also to be able to share. I've been in early childhood for a very, very long time. And so I will be interested just to kind of hear stories.
Well, I'm Holly. I have 2 little ones. I have a 5-year-old who attends pre-K here, and then a 2-year-old. And I'm just here because I don't want to cry in the bathroom every day anymore.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. That's a lot.
The world's on fire, but we're fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
hear any screaming?
Because they're not with their parents. They're-
Exactly.
You're fine.
We're outside of the car driving around.
I would not be surprised or mad. No, not at all. Whatever made him happy is what I'm happy for. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Alicia Reeves. I am a mother of a
18-year-old who's getting ready to go to IUSFN next year, and a sophomore boy who is almost 16. I'm also helping raise my 5-year-old nephew. So I'm kind of in the same boat of having older kids, but younger kids again, and all the parents that come here are the same age as my nephew, and I'm very much older than him. I taught elementary school for almost 20 years. I teach here at the preschool, pre-K, and I also run the Boone County mentoring program in Lebanon for Boone County. So
Oh, wow.
I work with a lot of kids, but you know, you never can know enough. Because every kid in every situation is different. So
Yes.
education is just amazing. So I'm very thankful to be here.
Anyone else at the table?
Anyone else? If you don't, you don't have to, but if does anyone else want to share before I go?
I'm Mary Kay. I had to write it down. I have a 38-year-old, a 35-year-old. Doesn't that sound terrible? 38. Jeez, I'm all you guys' mothers. And I have a 38-year-old, a 35-year-old, and then I have 4 grandchildren, a 14 and an 8 and a 6 and a 4. 3 girls and a boy.
Oh,
I oversee the preschool program, which we're excited to learn more about conscious discipline to get into the classroom because
Yeah.
we're experienced in the elementary schools.
isn't the elementary schools here?
That's what I was told,
Very cool.
because I heard about the timeout room for the teachers.
That sounds
Massage
wonderful,
chair.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I need that in the bathroom.
I mean, timeout is actually very effective for us as adults. I wish I could put myself in timeout.
not working for them, but it might.
It might- Yeah, exactly.
I'm Bessie Neubauer. I have an 8-year-old. My son will be 12 tomorrow. I also have my nieces and have had them so part-time, so we get every other weekend and a couple days a week, and they're 14, getting ready to turn 15, and they're twin girls. So
Oh, my.
lots of drama.
Wow.
And then I am here at preschool. I'm in Miss Funk with the 2s, and the Jeanette with the 3s. And I'm also in pre-K. So I get to see about all the kids, and that's wonderful. So just
Yeah.
some other strategies is always wonderful.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Every child.
Mhm.
I'm Kim Farrell and I teach the pre-K kids this year. And I have 2 adult sons, 32 and 28, and a granddaughter and 2 more granddaughters on the way. So.
Congratulations. Wonderful.
I'm Patricia Corkwell and I work here and I have 7 children, 16, 15, 13, 7, 5, 2, and 2 months.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
She's not biologically mine, but I am raising her for training of mine. So I'm just here so I can maybe use strategies in the classroom and definitely at home.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Julie Frederick. I teach in the pre-K room this year, and I have 5 children. I have a almost 26-year-old, 22-year-old, a 16, 13, and 11, and I'm getting ready to have my first grandbaby the end of next month.
Congratulations.
That's totally
I'm only like 25.
We've got some very busy people in this room. Very busy people.
Okay, I'm Debbie Miller. I taught at an elementary school for almost 20 years,
Oh, wow.
and now I teach here. And I have 3 children, and they all came here to preschool too. 31, 29, and 26, and 2 new grandbabies. And talking about locking yourself in the bathroom, I did that with my oldest, and my mom promised me I would not get another one like that. So.
My in-laws say that they told my husband that they hope that he has a child just like.
Wow. That's not fair to you. Wow, man.
I think they got their wish.
And it turned out great, so it's gonna be a pleasure.
We just gotta get there.
Yep.
I'm Deanne Berry. I teach here. I teach pre-K. And I have 3 kids, 22, 14 and 12, and a new grandbaby. So he's 4 weeks old.
Oh, wow.
And so.
Lots of new babies.
Yes. And so it's gonna be exciting to use these maybe techniques,
Yeah.
let alone at home.
Yeah.
But here.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And then last but not least, I'm Elena Nelson, since everybody else went. I've got 3 kids, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And I'm here to actually learn because our oldest is very hard-headed, hard to discipline. And
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
yeah.
All right, thank you. So this is just a overview of what we're going to be doing. Tonight's the introductory session, and then the 4 Wednesdays in April. I'm actually located in Fort Wayne. So the next 4 sessions, I'm going to be zoomed in. And Melissa and maybe Tanika will be kind of facilitating. And it's following this book, which is basically Conscious Discipline for Parents. So I'll be referring to this a lot. And if you're interested in checking it out, feel free to come up afterwards. So tonight I want to touch on child development and why it's so important when considering discipline, having that understanding of where the child is developmentally, because that's going to inform us on the best ways to provide that discipline. I'm going to do just a brief introduction to conscious discipline, just an overview of what conscious discipline is, and then the introductory chapter from the book. So there's a lot of information I've got packed into this. If we don't get to all of it, that's okay. But you're definitely not going to walk away with a lack of knowledge. So why are we starting with child development? I actually pulled a direct quote from Dr. Becky Bailey, who again she's the author of the book and she's the creator of Conscious Discipline. So we know that children develop their abilities, they kind of learn and grow at, she calls them orderly rates, but we know that children develop in typical ways, typically. And they also are going to misbehave in some typical ways. There are certain behaviors that follow development. And it's a normal developmental process that children undergo as they're misbehaving. So understanding kind of what's going on with a child, again, helps us to make sure that we're using the right strategies and the right skills to discipline them. Just an example would be 2-year-olds and the frequent tantrums. That's a very typical behavior for a 2-year-old, is they're trying to figure out what's okay for them to do in their world and what's not okay. So knowing that that's typical behavior is helpful. But does that mean that we don't discipline if they're having a tantrum? No, we still want to help that child, but we want to, knowing that it's typical will guide us in figuring out how to teach them to express their emotions in positive ways. Developmental milestones. Again, it's kind of keeping track of things that most children do by a certain age. Children are going to follow slightly different trajectories. They might develop a little more in one area than another, but in general, children do reach developmental milestones within certain windows of time. They may be somewhat late, somewhat early in different areas, but tracking that development is really helpful in case there is an area that they are falling behind than what is typical. And then at that time, you might want to take some other actions like talking to a pediatrician or a preschool teacher. And there's some great resources to help you do that. And I brought some of them tonight that you can take with you. So these are free materials through the CDC that you can, anybody can order, but again, I brought them here. They're basically, there's this little booklet called Milestone Moments. And it goes through every age from 2 months up to 5 years. So this is your child at 1 year. And it just tells you about their development across all of the learning domains. And then to go along with that, if you're not like a book paper person, there's an app that you can get on your phone. If you're not familiar with this, I'll put this on the table. You can just pull a sheet off and you can download this app and it will help you. You can put in multiple children into it and it'll help you monitor their development as they grow. This is just kind of fun, especially for the really little ones. It's a nice growth chart. And there's child development information embedded into all of it. And then there's actual growth charts. These are what WIC and the State Department of Health use as far as growth. So these are kind of fun too. So feel free to take some. I told Mary Kay I have more in my car if there's not enough or if you're interested in some later. And then anybody that they also have the same materials. Oh, I grabbed 2 of the same book. Well, there's books for 2-year-olds and books for 3-year-olds. There is a 1-year-old board book, which is really cool. Every time I've checked, it's been not available on the website. But so this is for 2-year-olds. Each page has developmental information. So as you're reading the story, so by age 2, most children begin to run. By age 2, most children begin to include others and chase games. So it's kind of fun. You can read and talk about it. The 3-year-old one's has even a little bit more information. And kids actually really like these books. So if you have a 1-year-old who's going to be 2, or a 2 or a 3-year-old, see me because I will give you one of these books. So I'm curious, obviously I would say the majority of you, it sounds like you've heard of conscious discipline. Some of the parents maybe that don't have the early childhood education background, if you've heard of conscious discipline and maybe if there's any misconceptions or concerns you've heard about it, if anyone is willing to share, or if you have some, but you don't want to record it, write it on a Post-it note. Yeah, so it's new to you. That's awesome. It was new to me when I first, my kids are older. It hasn't been around forever. It was originally introduced for schools, and then she came back and did the parent piece. Any teachers that have any thoughts or anything you've heard about it? You've all heard good things.
I've heard we have teachers on our preschool board and they highly recommend it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, I will say when I was getting my master's degree, I went to Ball State and the majority of my classmates were getting their elementary education degree. And this was before I knew anything about conscious discipline, but they were these are master's level educators, and they were very resistant to any idea of social emotional learning or behavioral support. It was interesting. They were very takeaway recess type behavior support, which supports behavior that you don't want to be supporting. So it's interesting. So I'm glad that it has a positive kind of reputation in this area. Some things that I have heard is too complicated, tried and true, like timeouts, rewards and punishments are easier, they work, so why change? If I can't use timeouts, then what do I have left? And just because it works in a school, what makes me think that it'll work at home? So those are all things I'm going to touch on tonight, just to give you a little bit more information. So at least you're not going to have an overall like grasp on conscious discipline leading tonight, but I hope that you'll at least have a good understanding of what you're going to be learning in the coming weeks, so that you don't have to fall back on any of these misconceptions. So really, conscious discipline is social emotional learning for all ages. And Dr. Becky Bailey talks about discipline is teaching and teaching is learning. It's evidence-based. There's been a lot of research. If you go to consciousdiscipline.com, there's a ton of research. It started out for childcare programs. And then she wrote a book, and there is a parent curriculum, which I'm using pieces of for this series, that is specifically for in the home. And really, when you think about social emotional learning, we can all benefit from that. Teachers, caregivers, parents, any adults in relationship with others, and as we interact with the world around us, we can all benefit from social emotional learning. I'm going to skip that one. So I want to just really briefly introduce the brain state model. I don't want to go into this a lot because we could spend forever on this. And she doesn't even really touch on it very much in the book. But I will say that it really helped me when I was learning about conscious discipline and thinking about how it can be used for myself personally, in addition to professionally. It really helped me understand. So I'm just going to kind of briefly touch on it. It's not to turn us into neuroscientists, but just give us an awareness of where we are at with our brain states, and then therefore understanding where children are at with their brain states. And again, that will help inform us the best ways to discipline in the moment. So there's an analogy with the hand that Dr. Becky Bailey does. I'm going to kind of do it all together. If I go too fast, you can stop and ask questions, but I also don't want to spend too much time bogged down on brain stuff. But if you think about, there's 3 sections of the brain that the brain states of conscious discipline really focus on. So the bottom is the brainstem, and this state is the survival state. So that's like the fight or the flight. That's when a child is really upset, or you're really upset, your heart's racing. And as far as misbehavior goes, that's where the hitting, throwing, kicking type behavior goes. And then the flight, it might not necessarily mean like actually running out of the room, but a child that becomes very withdrawn and kind of refuses to interact. That's still part of that lower brainstem. And the main question is, am I safe? The safety is the need for when you're in that lower part of your brain. So the second is the blue, and that's the limbic system. And this kind of goes right over the brain stem. And this is the emotional state. And the need here is that need for connection. Am I loved? So when a child isn't feeling connected, these type of behaviors, that's going to be more the name calling, the manipulation, the more emotional and more verbal responses. And then over the top, this front part is the prefrontal cortex. And those are all those executive skills, that executive functioning, which is where that's when we're calm, that's when we can learn, and we can practice new things, we can problem solve. That's the time when all the good stuff in the classroom can happen, is when this prefrontal cortex is over the emotional and over the survival state. So if a child is down here in the brainstem and they're really upset, triggered, flipping out about something, they're not going to be able to problem solve until they get moved up to that state. And the same with us. There's an analogy where you're flipping your lid. So you get triggered, say you're stuck in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you get really mad. You're not going to be able to problem solve and calm down and learn a new skill. So the way to do that is to get your lid back on and reach that state where you're calm again. So that was a lot. Do you have any questions, or is that just kind of enough to give you a basic understanding of how our brain works? So really, conscious discipline empowers us to be conscious of those brain states in ourselves and in children, so that we can have the skills we need to manage our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. And that's self-regulation. We talk a lot about self-regulation, and that's what it is managing our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And we can't teach children to self-regulate until we are able to self-regulate ourselves. And that's a big one. That's something a little unique. And that crying does not bother me at all. So don't worry. One unique thing about conscious discipline is that you address the adult first. So you have to think about what brain state you are in. If you have a child crying or screaming or vomiting or acting out, you are likely, your lid's flipped and you are not calm. That is not, you cannot teach that child to self-regulate until you are able to calm. So honestly, a teacher timeout room is I mean, if you have the opportunity to leave the children in your care, it really is about learning to self-regulate your own emotions before you help the child.
One thing that I'll just kind of interject in that, and I've done lots and lots of observations in classrooms and observing teachers. And so as she was kind of saying about the different states that you're in, if a child is doing something that you are not happy about or not listening or something, and you're saying to the child, I'm not very happy with you, but you're smiling, that's like a mixed signal, because you're smiling to that child, but you're not happy. So I'm not saying you need to put on a mean face, but you have to make sure you match that emotion with what you're really feeling. And so it just kind of goes along with two, and it's a learning process, is that naturally, if you're feeling like you can't calm your child down, especially babies, if you can't calm them down and you're really worked up and upset, if you think about it, you're laying that child up here on your chest. So they feel your heart beating very, very, very fast, even though you're trying to calm and trying to soothe them. And so I feel like it's one of those things that it comes with practice, because your reaction is natural, it's normal. But I think once you get into that, and you realize, okay, let me calm down first, and then I'm going to pick up this baby who's also upset to try to get that baby to feel my calm. And not just babies, but even with your younger children, it's just kind of trying to remember that your emotions are matching what you're really feeling, what they can see.
That's a perfect example. And I will say, with conscious discipline, there are ways that we can learn as adults to try to calm ourselves down. And there's research that shows 3 deep, slow breaths. Research shows, data shows, studies of the brain, that 3 deep, slow breaths has a physical impact on all of your body's responses. And it does work. It doesn't fix everything. You're still in the middle of chaos or whatever, but it does change that physical response. And as far as infants go, since we have 2 infants here, Dr. Becky Bailey calls it basically downloading calm for babies. So if you can't teach a child, you can't teach an infant how to do deep breathing. A 1-year-old, you can start to maybe teach some strategies like that. But with the very young children, you teach them through yourself being calm. So if you take those deep breaths and you feel yourself calm and you hold the baby to you, you're downloading calm to them, and keep breathing slowly. And if you keep doing that, essentially sharing that calmness with the baby. Now, that doesn't mean that that's always going to stop a baby from crying, because there might be other things that are causing that baby to cry. But that's a perfect example of a strategy, is to kind of download that with the younger the child. Sometimes just that physical touch and holding them and breathing yourself will impact their response. So thank you, Tika. Oh, but I went backwards. We're not doing the brain stuff again. So yeah, I mean, it comes down to, for ourselves, that self-discipline and self-control. And that's tricky for all of us. But we can't teach what we don't know. We want children to self-regulate. We want them to have self-control and not act crazy. But we can't teach that if we have not mastered how to do that for ourselves. Sometimes they're easier than others. And we all have triggers. We all have things, like sometimes life just doesn't go our way, and it's very frustrating and upsetting. But there are strategies and skills that we can learn from conscious discipline to help us with that. And I will say, I'll share more about this in a future session, but one example is that's been really helping me as I'm going through this, getting ready to lose some weight for a wedding in 2 months because I put it off. And there are some strategies that I've learned from conscious discipline that are helping me with that. So there are things that can benefit you in all kinds of areas of life. And really the book, I mean, it is about change. Being in control of ourselves consistently is hard. And it takes practice. And that's why I say I am certainly no expert. I like flipped my lid today because I saw a neighbor with a large dog walk by my front window and let her dog poop right in my yard, not back by the sidewalk, but up in my yard. She just got her phone out, scrolled Facebook, and then walked on. I opened my front door and stepped out, and then I'm like, what are you doing? You are a crazy person. I'm like, put your lid back on and get back in the house. So, I mean, it just like, I'm like, seriously? So I walked out on the front, I'm just like, and she didn't even notice, she was just walking. I'm like, what am I doing? So it's, you know, it's a practice. Yeah, I should, if I would have thought, I would have said, oh, sorry, here's a bag for you. So you can, you know, but I, you know, who knows? Anyway. It's crazy, woman. And really, as parents, as teachers, as caregivers, our behavior really is modeling a code of conduct. It's modeling a way to behave, and it's modeling values for the people that we interact with. And most of us model respect when we're calm and things are going okay. Most of us model respect, but what happens like when your neighbor lets her dog poop in your yard? When life gets stressful, and that wasn't really stressful, it was just more like, seriously, but then what are you modeling? I mean, if my kids had been home, they would have been like, Mom, you're crazy, don't overreact. And I'm not modeling a value of respect. So this book gives us strategies to handle life in those moments. How are we doing on time? I don't know. I have no idea what it's 6:52. Okay. Are there any questions or comments like so far? Am I throwing too much out there or just okay?
So the one thing I will say though is that Sarah, and she said it earlier on, is that it takes time. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be different with different children. It'll be different with different situations. So it's not intended to be a one stop fits all, because that's not true. It's not intended to make anyone feel like, oh, everybody reacts calmly to those situations and they know how to pull back and get it. It takes practice for you to get there, and really for you to just remember and to think about it. It takes practice, and it's like a mindset change. And so that's one thing to definitely think about. So don't feel like even after you finish, the series of trainings and you're trying these different things, if it doesn't work, try it again. And sometimes you may have 4 or 5 different tries, and eventually you'll see it. But I think the key is just that consistency and trying to get there and to make it happen. So.
No, you're very right. It does take time. There is no quick fix for challenging behaviors. No quick fix for our lives to all of a sudden become calm all the time. This is just a little bit more about self-control, and it's not pretending to be calm. It's being able to interact with others in healthy ways. I mentioned this before, to discipline and teach are the same acts. And she, like I said, she goes on to say, really teaching and learning, when you're teaching, you're also learning. So it's a journey. So really the emphasis is on teaching children how to behave and not controlling children's behavior. So that is one of when you were talking about, that's a mindset change. Teaching is about giving. You're teaching skills, appropriate behaviors, as opposed to control, which is about getting. So she talks about there's discipline that comes from fear, and there's discipline that conscious discipline embodies, which is disciplining through love. And I love this statement, nothing holds more power than love, yet love has been neglected as a power of discipline. And this makes me remember when I was a younger parent, I did this, I was attending some parent group and they had us do a mark on each of our forearms for our interactions with our children during the day, and every positive interaction or positive words, make a mark on one arm, and negative or punitive or corrective interaction, put it on the other arm. And then you realize how many of your interactions with your child are directing them to do something or not to do something, and how few of them are loving and nurturing. I considered myself to be a loving and nurturing mother, but when I look at all of my interactions with my children during the day, and I wish I could say it gets easier with teenagers, but I can't tell you many times at the end of the day with my 14-year-old that I'm like, we didn't talk about anything today except if we didn't have work to do. And so just kind of really thinking about that love that we want to share with our children. And she breaks it down into love being an action, which I really appreciated this. So that's why I included it. Love increases that security and provides that safety that all children need. And if you remember, that's the brainstem. And the security is the brainstem, the safety, and then the love is the limbic system. Children need that. So before they can behave in ways that we want them to, they have to feel loved and they have to feel secure. Love travels from the worthy to the worthy. We have to love ourselves and give ourselves acceptance again before we can teach it to our children. That's a hard one. That can be a really hard one. And really accepting your own self-worth so that you can teach your children to have self-worth also. It looks for the highest and best in people and situations. And to me, that goes a little bit back to the child development, knowing where your child is developmentally. Because if, say, you have a 2-year-old that's having a tantrum, knowing that that child isn't deliberately doing it to, or thinking to yourself, okay, my child isn't doing this to make me crazy. My child isn't doing this because they want me to have to leave the grocery store and not be able to get the groceries that I need for dinner tonight, and we're just ruining the whole evening. The child doesn't know how to express an emotion and is down here and freaking out. Doesn't mean that you don't address it, but knowing that it is not the child's fault necessarily. And love accepts what is. So I had to write this down because I wasn't sure. So fear looks to blame. So it's, you're making me have to leave the grocery store, not get groceries, and now I can't make dinner, and now the evening is ruined. Whereas love accepts what is as it is, and okay, what can I do for the situation? I don't have the food from the grocery store to make dinner. How can I problem solve through that? And it's really about teaching children to express themselves honestly and authentically, but responsibly and safely. Does that make sense? All that stuff. Okay. And that brings us to the choice versus force. So love-based discipline is built on the belief that children choose whether or not to behave. So rather than that thinking, how can I make my child go to bed when it's bedtime and stop getting up, shifting your thinking to how can I help my child be more likely to choose to go to bed and stay in bed and not get up? What can I do to set that up so that my child will be more likely to choose that? Change requires motivation. So the motivation can come from fear or love. And an example of that, back to the grocery store thing, the disciplining from fear, one example would be if you tell your child, okay, if you're quiet and you're good and you don't make any noise, you can have a cookie when we're leaving the grocery store. So that would be a punishment. So the child would behave because they don't want to be deprived of the cookie. So what do they learn from that situation? And think about that child growing up, and what did they learn? That eating yummy food is a reward, and it tastes good and it feels good. And they're not learning, okay, this is appropriate. It's appropriate behavior to be calm and not yell in the grocery store. They're learning cookie is going to make me feel better. Or eating when I'm upset is going to make me feel better. And believe me, I've got those messages in my brain. So it's, and then the flip side would be, you better, be quiet and stay, in the car and stop touching everything, or you're going to get a spanking. So the fear is they don't want to get a spanking. So they might be really upset about something, but they hold it all in because their fear is that they don't want to get a spanking. So what do they learn from that? Do they learn what appropriate behavior in a grocery store is? And they might learn to not share their emotions or their feelings, or not talk about what's going on with them. They might become one that is more explosive with how they express their emotions as they grow older.
You have an example of a love-based discipline in that scenario?
In that scenario? Yes. And actually, and I will say too, the very back of this book, the last, there's a whole chapter, and we're going to talk about it on the last week in April, Loving Guidance in Action, Solving the Top Discipline Problems. And she goes through like very common scenarios just like that, and kind of problem solves and looks at, okay, these are the strategies that you can use. Depending on the age of the child and what I know of the child and what is wrong with the child. So I guess the first thing would be, what brain state is the child in? Are they just feeling tired and whiny and impatient, and they want to leave? Or are they really upset and throwing themselves on the ground and throwing a fit? I would think about where they're at. If they're in the lower section of the brain and they are very upset, the first thing would be to try to calm them, to try to do some, we are not finished shopping yet. We have 2 more aisles to go through. Take some deep breaths with me, and then just practice some breathing and see if you can get them to move up the centers of their brain. If they're just being really whiny, you try choices. There's a whole list of skills. So choices is a strategy. Maybe, do you want to pick out the cereal that we're gonna buy? Or do you want to go to the next aisle and pick out the juice? And then if they don't like your answer, like I want to go home, just keeping that assertive voice. Like you mentioned, making sure that your words match your tone and your face. You can be very assertive, and it doesn't mean that you're being mean, but just being very assertive. We will go home when we're finished with the groceries. Let's count how many rows do we have left. We've got 2 more rows to go through, and then we will go home. But again, if they start getting really upset and they're down here, then you're going to have to try to calm them. And if you can't, then that's taking them from the situation. Does that kind of answer? Okay. But we will talk more about that and those strategies, I promise. And I've been in those scenarios with my own children, and I didn't have all these strategies, but, and I can guarantee I have definitely done the rewards and the bribery. So when you think about the discipline from fear, the threatening, spanking, timeouts, threatening timeouts, rewards and punishments, they do work. The child often will comply. But in the next time that happens, the child's going to act the same way because they didn't learn something to help them change their behavior the next time. So it kind of moves beyond, you can't just rely on those quick fixes. Although there are times when you're tired and you just want to get your groceries and you're just going to say, get the cookie and get out of there. I mean, no one is perfect. So we're not saying don't ever do that. But think about, in that instance, you didn't teach your child really what you want to teach them. But the next time, maybe you will. Next time you'll be able to. And remembering that misbehavior, all children do it. And it does play a role in your child's development. You want to teach them new skills to replace their misbehavior. And you want to prevent it from being repeated and becoming habitual. But just remembering that children are going to misbehave. And children learn from making mistakes. We all do. We all learn from making mistakes. What time is it? Okay. I'm just gonna briefly mention this. These are all the things positive things that can happen through misbehavior. It's how children learn. It helps children learn how to communicate their needs and get their needs met. This a big one. Sometimes it teaches children how to say no. That's a huge one. That's a huge one for adults, is learning how to say no to things that are not going to be healthy or good for us. And we want children that don't necessarily want to hear it from your toddler over and over and over again, but when they become a preteen and a teen, you want them to know how to say no and how to express themselves. And it helps them to learn self-awareness and self-discipline. Okay, this is the last thing, and then I'm gonna stop the recording and so we can have some more discussion if you want. And I'm gonna have to look this up because I'm not completely familiar with it offhand. One of the things that conscious discipline does, there's a whole book about it, but she has this thing called I love you rituals. And if you remember the emotional state, the limbic system, their need is to feel connected and to feel loved. We all need to feel connected and feel loved. So these I love you rituals, you can make them up yourself. There's a ton on her website that you can access for free. There's a book. But really, if you do those regularly with children, it just builds that connection and that love and that safety and that security, which will help them when they're in that state. So this one, does anyone know the original nursery rhyme to this? I'd have to, I know it's,
She had so many
Children.
children, she didn't know what to do.
yep. She's,
She fed them alligators.
Spanked him and
Yeah,
sent him to
she-
bed.
she gave them some broth without any bread. She whipped them all soundly and put them to bed. And how, I mean, I can tell you, I have felt like that poor old woman at the end of the day sometimes where I'm so tired and I'm so overwhelmed and I don't know what to do and I can't wait for bed. But thinking about the love that we feel for our children, I almost wonder, it's a little too young to do it with. I'm just gonna kind of describe how this works. So I'm gonna say the words and then I'm gonna kind of describe the actions that you can do with your child or a child in your classroom. So you would put the child in front of you facing out with your arms around them. A wonderful woman lived in a shoe. And then hold their arms out and kind of massage their, she talks a lot about touch. Being in the classroom is gonna be a little different, knowing like what children are comfortable with that from a teacher or caregiver. But kind of doing a little massage, that's very calming for children. So she had so many children, massaging them, their arms, and then touching each of their fingers. She had so many children. She knew exactly what to do. Touching her other fingers. She held them and then put their hands in yours. She rocked them and rocked their hands and tucked them into bed and then bring the child's arms and give them a hug. I love you is what she said. So that's just a little cute thing. What? Yeah, go to bed. Yeah. But yeah, it's just a cute little, it involves those elements of connection that are so important. You're at their level, that physical affection, that verbal affection, a little bit of playfulness. And if you do those on a regular basis, it really does make a difference. Whether it's with your own children or in a classroom with multiple children, just helping them to feel connected and loved and safe. So this,
the name of the lady that has the ritual?
it's Dr. Becky Bailey. If you go to, and I'll send you the last slide of this. It has research.
Okay.
If you go to consciousdiscipline.com,
Okay.
I bought this book on eBay for like $3.
Okay.
So it's it's a little old bit and it's got a ton of them in here. So yeah, that's just a resource that the good time to do those are when everyone's calm. Because that's when a child can like soak it in and learn and feel that way. It's not necessarily the time to do it if a child's down here and waking out. But when you do these things when they're calm, then that feeling of connection and safety and being loved, they'll be able to resource that when they're in times of not calm. So
My daughter does one with her girls and it's when they're calm, but it's mostly like to promote, to make them feel loved. Like
mhm,
I am strong, I am
Yeah.
beautiful, I'm loved.
yeah. Yeah.
With my kiddos, every morning when I wake them up, I have one that's super easy to wake up and one that the house can pull down. So every morning I literally, my 12-year-old, I still like grab him when he's in bed and I just
Oh,
hold him for
yeah.
30 seconds before I even wake him up. And a lot of times they'll wake up that way,
Yeah.
but it's when everyone's calm before the rush of the morning
Yeah.
starts. Like I want them to wake up on a good note because our days bring so much chaos.
And how wonderful of a way to wake up. That's wonderful. I want someone to wake me up that
I
way.
call it my morning.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you know, that feeling of closeness and connection and love follows that. That's wonderful. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Well, oh yeah, this is a journey. It's a journey, enjoy it. And I will send this slide to you, Mary Kay. Oh, never mind, I won't. But yeah, consciousdiscipline.com has a lot of free resources.
Okay.
There's a whole free resource section. So, do you guys want to come and